Hello everyone, I'm delighted to be joining you today really to congratulate David on the publication of his book. Of course, David has been a stalwart of Westminster. He has been around for a long time, but of course he's got a great deal of experience, insight and knowledge. He's of course a fellow Essex MP and a great Essex MP. So David, I look forward to receiving my copy of your book, and of course I wish you every success.
Next month, a book which I have written called Eyes and Ears, A Survivor's Guide to Westminster, will be published, part of which covers Brexit. And yes, by inference, everyone will be in the book. Would my right honourable friend agree with me that the last general election was not fought on how political parties might handle the coronavirus pandemic, but was categorically about ensuring that the result of the 2016 referendum was implemented in full? Will my right honourable friend confirm that that is what he intends to see happen?
Prime Minister.
I can indeed, Mr. Speaker. I congratulate my right honourable friend on his new book.
And if you were to read his excellent book, Madam Deputy Speaker, Eyes and Ears, probably available in all good bookshops, you would be aware that he is the proud patron of the Conservative Animal Welfare Foundation and has devoted much of his life to campaigning on behalf of our furry friends.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to this event. Thank you for joining. If at the end of my being interviewed you would like to ask me any questions, please put those questions in the live chat section. And if you would like to purchase the book, there is a link that you can find below. So please go to that. You can get the book from Ian Dale at Politicos. You can get it from Amazon. You can also get it direct from Lueth, the publishers. But finally, you could also get it directly from myself. I've got a number of my books in the House of Commons, and through your own Member of Parliament, if you tell them that you would like the book, I'm sure they'd be only too pleased to collect them directly from my office in the House of Commons. I hope you enjoy the evening.
Well, good evening, everyone. And here we are in the wonderful Wales. And we've got tonight two people who are going to interview me, wonderful Welsh Conservative members of Parliament, Stephen Crabb and Virginia Crosby. And I'm going to attempt to say good evening in Welsh, but I think Virginia is going to correct me. Nos Swaifar Pal.
That was brilliant, David. Absolutely spot on.
And your constituency, Virginia, is Ynys Môn.
Almost, Ynys Môn.
Ynys Môn. And Stephen, how do you pronounce your constituency?
Preseli, Pembrokeshire.
Preseli, Pembrokeshire.
That's the English version. We won't go do the Welsh one. Preseli, Pembrokeshire.
And of course, I go back to Virginia once having Keith Best as the MP. Correct me, Stephen, was Nick Bennett the MP there once?
You're correct, yes. From 1987 to 92. So you would have crossed over each other in that 1987 Parliament. But before that, it was Nicholas Edwards.
Oh, my goodness, who was Secretary of State for
Correct.
Wales. Yeah.
Correct.
Well, look, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us this evening. My two parliamentary colleagues are going to interview me about this book, Eyes and Ears, A Survivor's Guide to Westminster. And it's self-evident why it's called Eyes and Ears. It's really eyes and nose when we vote, ears listening to people. And it's a survivor's guide to Westminster because, ladies and gentlemen, if you're not aware, the average length of time that someone is a member of Parliament is 8 years, just over 8 years. And I'm now into my fourth decade. So I've survived in spite of all sorts of trials and tribulations, which you go on to Wikipedia, you can unfortunately be reminded about, although they're not always accurate. But anyway, Stephen, you're going to be Michael Parkinson, and Virginia, you're going to be Oprah Winfrey, God help us. Okay, Who wants to go first with the questions?
Well, shall I start, David? I was born in Malden in Essex, where the sea salt's from, and I think you've got quite a good experience of Essex. So, what are your thoughts on Essex? I mean, I personally believe it's one of the UK's best kept secrets.
I love Essex, Virginia. Although I'm a Londoner through and through, that's where I was born. My next favourite place is definitely Essex. I was once famous for 30 seconds. That will probably come during the course of our conversation. But when I became famous for 30 seconds, I was known as Essex Man. Essex woman was sort of typecast in a slightly unfavourable way. But no, it's the biggest county. And I love every part of Essex. Now, I've been fortunate enough to represent two constituencies in Essex, Basildon and Southend West, completely different, but where you're from, Morden, is lovely because I'm animal mad. I would love to have been born on a farm, but without all the hard work that it involves. But as a child, I love going around. We had a family friend who had a farm in Morden, and I also loved the sort of firework display which took place every year opposite the lovely river there. So I love Essex, and I love Essex people.
Oh, that's lovely. And I'm quite a new MP, elected in 2019. There were 107 of us elected. So we had some fantastic sort of first few days. We were really well looked after, and we had these black backpacks that had our iPads in. I think it'd be really helpful to have actually had a copy of your book. Actually, would have been really nice to have that popped in. But in your intake, in 1983, how well looked after were you? What was your sort of introduction to Westminster like?
Oh, look, Virginia, light years apart, really. Believe it or not, we had an even bigger new intake than you had. And and don't take offence to this, Virginia, but I sort of feel sorry for the 2019 intake because it's been a rotten parliament. I mean, it just hasn't functioned properly, frankly. And given the shortened hours we work in any case, we haven't got to know each other as well as we were able to in 1983. Now, in 1983, there wasn't an introductory course telling you what the table office was, explaining the role of the speaker, telling you all about the House of Lords, telling you how to table questions, telling you even where the loos were. None of that existed. You were just sort of left to sink or swim. I mean, Virginia, I didn't have a mentor before I joined the House of Commons. I'd only been there once. I sat in the public gallery. And other than one possible MP who I was fairly friendly with, I had no contacts at all. But what used to happen is that colleagues helped each other. There was lots of personal contact, and unfortunately, as our hours have become shorter and shorter, because when I first joined, we physically worked in the House of Commons Monday to Friday. Friday would only be the shortened day, but we'd all be there. Monday to Thursday, we'd start at 2:30 in the afternoon, and that was to allow ministers to get out and about, and some of them even, a number of MPs had second jobs, and nothing wrong with it in those days. It sort of worked extremely well. They certainly did more than their 8 hours. But we would sit until 2, 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning. And during that time, we would really get to know each other, not only in the tea room, but in all sorts of parts of Westminster. And that's when colleagues would explain the way the House of Commons worked. So you really learnt on the job. And just without boring the viewers tonight, just to give you an example, Dame Janet Fuchs, who was a deputy speaker, she's now in the House of Lords, gave me a tip. She said, David, if anyone writes and thanks you for something that you've done for them, keep that letter and put that in the Christmas card list. And every year, send them a Christmas card. And I bet you anything, they never forget it, and they're more likely to put their poster up in the window. And that's exactly what I did. And she was absolutely right. Another member of Parliament called Rhodes Boyson, who was a minister in Ireland and education. He said, David, and again, this was Virginia, not something the clerks could tell you about, but learning on the job. He said, when you go to a function, so many of our colleagues who are the guest speakers just sit there and they chat with the people either side. Don't do that. Between every course, you go round and chat with everyone. And that's exactly what I do. And I still managed to have a meal as well. And then it was pairing. Well, of course, Stephen and Virginia, you haven't really been in a position to, frankly, have pairs. It hasn't been like that. But in those days, we had a pair. Well, I had long hair, actually. It's a bit long at the moment for obvious reasons, but I had very long hair. And a Conservative colleague looked at me and said, oh, very pleased to meet you, although you're not supposed to shake hands. Can I pair with you? He didn't even realise that I was a Conservative member of Parliament. But again, they explained about pairing. There are so many tips that we picked up, whereas now, Virginia, you get a folder to take away. You're given, I think it was when Theresa May called that general election, I think she thought we were going to get a good majority. Let's not even go there at the moment. When I came back, I addressed everyone in the chamber of the House of Commons to give them a few tips what to do. I was the Conservative representative. None of that happened in 1983. It was worlds apart. You just learnt on the job. And Virginia, you were told to spend hours and hours in the chamber to listen to what other people were saying. None of that happens now.
Well, that's fabulous, David. And in terms of, you mentioned some of your sort of your tips in terms of a Christmas card list and saying hello to everybody. And I was reading your book about sending 18th birthday cards. But in terms of campaigning, I'm in a three-way marginal here, so it's really great to hear those tips. But you also talk about your motorhome and your signature campaign song. And I was wondering whether you could actually share your song with us tonight.
Oh, no. Well, it used to be vote, vote, vote for David Amos. He's the only man for you. If you want to be true blue, then you vote for David Amos. He's the only man for you. I think that was the song. Well, I play it every year.
Sounded all right to me.
Every time we have a general election. I think now you've come onto a good point, Virginia. I think I'm going to include that in another one of these evening gatherings. And what I did, because in those days there was lots of razzmatazz. Elections have changed so much, and this mobile home that I had, it would double up as a mobile surgery, which was wonderful. We used to have sort of David Amos MP on the top of it and flip the board over. We could use it like that. And you name it, every famous figure from the past has ridden in my mobile home with me, listening to the campaign song. Vote, vote, vote for David Amos. If you want to be true blue and to air your points of view, then David Amos is the only man for you. Ooh, ooh. I got it.
It's a nice rhyming there.
And it's on a loop and it goes over and over again. And a true story, we got a number of local ladies to sing it. And we went to recording studio, they sort of repeated them. And it's very, very precious. And what happens now, so I still go around with it in South and West, people think it's an ice cream van. You know, when they used to have ice cream vans, call out Tony Bell time, but people absolutely love it. So yeah, Virginia, it worked for me, and who knows, it might still work for Dave, but I don't rap or I don't do hip hop or garage music.
I wouldn't rule it out. I would love to see you on TikTok, David. And I'm sure a lot of other people would.
Well, look, the final thing before I can see Stephen sort of raring to go, I did record something with Bananarama, And in my office, we've got a silver disc, and it's the last time they were successful. And if you go onto YouTube, you can see myself. I don't know if either of you have heard of him, but Virginia might have. He was once the MP for Chelmsford, Norman St. John Stevens. And he was in Margaret's cabinet. You've got a picture of the two of us sitting in the back of a rather nice car going round and round Westminster Square, hand jiving to the Bananarama latest hits. It's hilarious. Okay, Stephen, over to you.
Thank you, David. Reading your book, one of the things that really comes across, and it comes across actually now this evening talking to you, is the joy that you've taken from a life dedicated to politics and Parliament, and your love of the institution of Parliament really comes out strongly in the book. But you also signed a note of caution, almost warning about the future, the development of Parliament, what that might look like in the future. You just talked about the changes in the working hours of Parliament and how that's led to a change in the way that colleagues interact with each other and being able to give advice to each other. You also in the book talk about the televising of Parliament. What's the single biggest change that you've noticed at Westminster in the decades that you've been doing this job?
God. Well, Stephen, it is sad, but I do love the place. It sort of looks the same as it was in 1983, but it isn't the same. And you're absolutely right. You see, look, Virginia and Stephen, you're so lucky. Your maiden speeches are on video. We weren't televised. So my maiden speech, I've got a dodgy old sort of tape thing that, you know, you can't even use these days of my maiden speech. And you are right, Stephen. I spoke and voted against the televising of our proceedings because I felt that it would ruin, if you like, the sort of mystique of Parliament. And I thought with the TV camera on us all the time, people would see if we were scratching ourselves and how we looked. And, you know, occasionally, dare I say it, members nod off. And I was very, very worried about that. And I thought both of you would say naively, I thought, well, if you want to see the House of Commons, you've got to go there in person. And that's really when you get it. And I can see myself walking through the division lobbies with Betty Boothroyd. She took a different view and she said, okay, David, what is your view? And I explained it to her. And she said, well, it's up to you then to persuade the House. Well, I didn't get anywhere, Stephen, and it's been televised. I do think my misgivings have to an extent been proved right. The three of us, we go on perhaps for vanity reasons, the parliamentary channel on 232. It's got a bit of an audience, not a huge one. The only thing people are interested in are Prime Minister's Question Time. And Prime Minister's Question Time, I'm sorry, Virginia, it's rubbish these days. We used to have it, so that changed, Stephen, from having it on a Tuesday and Thursday for 15 minutes. It's gone down the tube. I mean, people standing up saying, oh, isn't the sun shining? Do you agree with me? Or you're a nasty person.
That was a Tony Blair change, wasn't it? That was a Tony Blair change. Well,
Tony Blair, don't start me on him, the most wicked politician I've ever met. He ruined the country and he ruined the House of Commons. So I'll come to that in a minute.
I'm going to come back to Tony Blair in a second, David. But finish your point.
I've got a lot to say about him, but it's not good, Tony, as far as he's concerned. But the changes, it also meant, Stephen, that people aren't going to the chamber anymore. And I'm as guilty, because you can just sit in your room and watch it on the monitor, you see. So all the excitement, and it used to be electric, the atmosphere in the House of Commons. Now, since Virginia's been there and her 103 colleagues, it hasn't been exciting, really, because we've not been there en masse. And you and I know, Stephen, The 2017 to 2019 Parliament was absolute rubbish. I mean, we were going there just to be slaughtered in all the blooming votes. I mean, it was a horrible time. So you've got to go back to when it was up and running. But I think that the biggest change, I mean, people are different. The sort of person who becomes an MP is different. The place is different. But I will fight to the end those people who are trying to get us out of the building permanently. The idea that we move out of there for 10 years, I mean, people would say, oh, David, you're living in the past. Why should we keep going through the lobbies? Let's press buttons, or put up hands, etc. The reason we vote in the lobbies is to meet people. And you grab the Prime Minister. I mean, well, Margaret Thatcher used to walk through the division lobby. It was as if there was a glow around her. But you could still say, Margaret, now what are you doing to help with all this? It's a personal contact rather than emailing people, etc. So it's a tradition, Stephen, that I want to hang on to. And I do not want some sort of parliamentary building with no atmosphere whatsoever. And if they get us out for 10 years, you know, given I've said the average time a person is an MP for 8 years, we'll be never coming back. So the biggest change, Stephen, you asked me for the biggest change, is the sort of person who becomes an MP. They have changed completely. That's not a bad thing because we represent the general public, but my goodness, it has changed. You only have to see physically how it's changed. And of course, we used to have very few ladies in the House of Commons, but it's the people who are now members of Parliament who've changed.
Well, one of the things about you, Sir David, that I know very well because we've spent so many years together in the Commons, but it comes out very strongly in the book, is you are very straight talking. In the book, you've just talked about Tony Blair a few moments ago. I think in the book you refer to him as an egotistical maniac. You refer to Nicholas Sturgeon as Mrs. Cranky. You describe Hollywood as a dump. You don't pull your punches when you come to expressing your views and opinions. Do you think that politicians...
This is why I've never got anywhere, Stephen.
Well, do you think that politicians today are far too shy about expressing strong, clear views? And if so, why is that? What's happened that's made too many politicians too afraid to express clear and strong views like you do?
Well, thank you for saying that. Look, colleagues are now experiencing through social media how evil and nasty people can be. I'm useless on the way you communicate with people now. I mean, Virginia said TikTok. I mean, could you see me standing in front of a wall doing TikTok? It's never going to happen.
Well, you did with Bananarama.
Facebook. I'm not on Facebook. Reluctantly, I've gone on to Twitter, so I tweet things, but you can't have an argument with me on Twitter. But my goodness, I've had a death threat against me, well, a number of death threats against the Irish Republican Army. I had a young family at the time. I had to sleep with sort of a button to press attacks. I do think, Stephen, that because since I've been an MP, we've had a number of politicians murdered. And I do think that if you go into public life, Stephen, your family takes a very big hit. They really do. And they're not all signed up to it, frankly. And I do think colleagues are increasingly worried about speaking out on things because how nasty and even violent people can be, frankly. And I think it's a shame. Look, at the moment, we've got a number of our colleagues in the Commons and the Lords who've spoken out about China. And I think that took some bravery to do it. But because of social media, I'm sure that's meant that people hold back. I think it's a shame. I cannot stomach creeps and crawlers. You wouldn't realise that, but, you know, The king is dead, long live the king. And I've just seen it's like a revolving whatever. This one's going to be prime minister, this one's going to be leader. I've seen it so many times, really. I'm just not like that, Stephen. I've consistently believed in things. To me, the little things count in life. You send me a little handwritten note, people don't even do that now. I think you're marvellous. And it's the small little gestures. We're not all the same because, as you know, MPs have changed. But I think, because Virginia mentioned earlier, a three-way marginal. In Basildon, it was myself and Labour. Came to Southend West, it's myself and it was myself and the Liberals. Although in one election, Virginia, I was in a sort of three-way margin. So I've got experience fighting all sorts of people. But given that I started in 1979 in Newham, whereby they'd only ever had a Labour MP and the council's only ever been 100% Labour. And there I was, I thought, well, I'm going to lead by example. So we're going to have a Miss Bluebell float go through the high street, just past where the Olympic Stadium is now. And I think people, I don't know whether they stand back and think, well, he's barking mad, hasn't got a chance here. But I think if you're brave and tell people what you stand for, which is always what Margaret Thatcher did. She didn't always do things that were popular. She told people what a policy was and then argued for that policy. She wasn't into short-term issues. You know, now we're driven by some sort of blooming media person or celebrity who happens to think, oh, we should do this, we should do that, and then we follow them. I mean, for goodness sake, let us have some beliefs and let us fight for those beliefs and take the general public with us. I mean, isn't that what an election is all about? So, yeah, I have got a big mouth, haven't I, Stephen? So I tell people what I believe in, put my foot in it, right, left and centre, but I've survived in spite of it all. And what I don't want to see, Stephen, is a parliament without characters. I want to see characters. Now, I'm not going to name them because they're still colleagues of ours. And remember, Virginia and Stephen, I'm only halfway through my parliamentary career. And the sequel to this book will be when I've left voluntarily. And I'm going to need a lot of money to employ Carter Ruck to defend all the libel suits that there will be. But there are 2 or 3 of our colleagues still in Parliament at the moment who I would describe as characters. They're not afraid to speak out on issues. I mean, whether or not I agree with what they're speaking out on and protesting about, I'll have a conversation with you both offline. But I think it's a shame if we all become carbon copies of a typecast politician. So I admire our colleagues who, in their own way, pick out a niche and sort of fight on behalf of, you know, but we're only in Parliament for a short time, really. Life is very, very short for us all. And look, as the violins, my children would be saying the violins are coming out, but we all went into politics to make a difference. And, you know, we all need to try and make a difference. Isn't that the case, Virginia?
No, absolutely. And I was it's fascinating that you're only halfway through. So yeah. My question to you would be, so what more have you got to achieve? What would you like to achieve? And what would you like to be most remembered for?
Oh, well, look, first of all,
if you ever do.
Well, first of all, I'm not going anywhere until Southend becomes a city.
Absolutely.
So if people want to get rid of me voluntarily, they've got to make Southend a city. No, I particularly, Virginia, I do feel strongly on this. And I'm trying to think of your separate views on the European Union. So this isn't to stir things up, but because I'm older than both of you, I voted in the first referendum, absolutely slaughtered, never thought for a minute we'd have an opportunity in another second referendum. But I did see our power absolutely slip away, frankly. And, you know, what was the point at the end of it going to vote for a member of Parliament because it didn't have much power over everything. So, Virginia, whilst I'm still an MP, I want us to really get our power back. I mean, that what Tony Blair did to give all the power away to unelected quangos was an absolute disgrace. And the three of us are very proud of this tiny little country. And I want the United Kingdom, because look, this is the worst set of world leaders in my lifetime. Well, we've had a change of American president, so hopefully if he can learn how to walk up and down the stairs into an airplane, things might get a little bit better. But, you know, I don't think we've got quite great leaders. Whereas in my time, you know, having met the great leaders, when Mikhail Gorbachev came to the House of Commons and he looked at me and said, "Oh, you're very young." I said, "Well, you're very young to be the leader of that great country." But when we had Ronald Reagan, Margaret Thatcher and Mikhail Gorbachev together, we got things done, but we don't seem to be able to do that anymore. And I want, while I'm still an MP, Virginia, I want our country to punch above its weight again. Because if you think, we've got history, and I know it's controversial at the moment and some people want to write off our history, but I'm pretty proud of the number of things we've done, frankly. And I won't have a word said against the monarch. I mean, she's absolutely fantastic, the Queen. 70 years putting up with all the rubbish that she's had to put up with. Thank goodness we've got a monarch rather than a president. So yeah, and another thing, Virginia, it breaks my heart when I see people sleeping on pavements, rough sleepers and all that. And when I met Mother Teresa and she said to me, "David, look, how have you got people in cardboard boxes sleeping outside Charing Cross Station?" So it's always gone on. And you can't live people's lives for them. They've got mental health problems and drugs and all of that. But somehow I do want to see how we can crack the issue of housing in our country. But it'll be your generation, Virginia, who I suspect will be more successful than my generation at that particular issue.
David, one of the issues that you made a real difference on during your time as a Member of Parliament has been the issue of warm homes and quality of housing. Is that a cause that derives from part of your upbringing? Where did you get that passion? You've just spoken there about people sleeping rough. Where do you get your passion for these issues from?
You flatter me, Stephen. I'd never heard of fuel poverty and I never knew anything about warm homes. Now, you listen to this, Virginia. Every year we have a ballot for private members' bills and 20 people are pulled out of the hat. It was on the 18th occasion that my name was pulled out of the hat. And all of a sudden, everyone wanted to know me. I thought, well, hang on, I'm not a big national figure. And it was because they wanted me to take up their particular bill. And with 5 minutes to go, Stephen, I made up my mind to go with, believe it or not, it was Friends of the Earth and other organisations, because they seem the most professional. And although I might have gone on embryo research, abortion and one or two other things like that, I wanted a bit of legislation to get onto the statute book. And that's why I signed up with them. And it's one of the proudest things, Stephen, I've ever done. But it was thanks to those people behind me. And Virginia probably wouldn't have known either of these colleagues. But Eric Forth and David McLean, who's now in the House of Lords, they made my life hell. A little bit like two of our three of our colleagues now who try to sabotage private members' bills on a Friday afternoon. Those two did, and they were wonderful operators. We never had a bad word about it, but they tried to sabotage my bill. But because I spent time with the clerks learning about these things, at the 11th hour, I pulled a fast one on them, pulled the title of the bill, and it's history what happened. And that, Stephen, was the most expensive private members' bill, certainly since I've been at Parliament. It meant that people could get their lofts insulated, their windows changed, their doors changed. And God, I'm so glad that I allowed those people to persuade me. And yeah, I'm really so glad that I did that, Stephen.
Fantastic. Great achievement.
So David, I've got 3 children, and I think you've got slightly more than that. What would your tips be in terms of being a member of Parliament and having a family and really trying to get that balance? My constituency is 6.5 hour sort of drive away. There's one fast train a day. And obviously we've sort of got 2 jobs really. So how did you manage that? And in terms of what sort of support that you have?
Well, look, Virginia, I've got 5 children. How stupid can you be? I love them, but I don't like them all the time. And although mine are grown up, the trials and tribulations over the years, with 1 or 2 of them being a bit damaged at the time when I was in the firing line in Basildon, and my dear wife didn't know what she was signing herself up to, really. The Labour Party were in those days were absolutely evil and nasty to me in Basildon. We had a horrible time, and I suppose looking back on it, Virginia, I'm being frank with you, don't make the mistakes that I did. So just to give you 2 examples, God, I'm sharing this with our audience tonight, but I was born a Catholic. I'll die a Catholic. I don't know whether it's all a lot of old rubbish. It's only going to be until I die that I'm going to find out whether or not it was good what I was doing. But I wanted my children to go to Catholic schools and then secondary schools to go to Catholic single-sex schools. And I won't dwell on it now, but I did make a big mistake with my son, insisting that he went to this single-sex school. It was all comprehensive. I mean, it wasn't a private school, outside the area in Westminster, and the most terrible row took place. We have a daily newspaper. They even brought out a special edition. It was mentioned in the House of Commons. Never mind the hypocrisy of Labour members, you know, who are sending their children to private schools and to grammar schools. It wasn't even a grammar school. I made a big mistake there. Another big mistake, Virginia, I made was having one of my children canvass with me. And there I was canvassing in Basildon. There's a rural bit of it. And I was going down this road with my oldest daughter, Catherine, knocked on the door, a little bit like Hilly Billy's, and there was no answer. So went next door, got an answer there. The next minute, we saw smoke coming out from the property's door that I'd knocked on. We charged there and we saw a human being on fire.
Oh, gosh.
And we dialed. We didn't have iPhones then. We called the fire brigade, etc. Came very quickly. He was carrying, we didn't know at the time, a bowl of paraffin, and the whole lot had gone up in smoke. So myself and my daughter, I think she was 11 or 12 at the time, we were both in a state of shock, really. And I'll never forget going to his funeral when that general election was over. So there are 2 mistakes that I've made, but I just really wish now, Virginia, I did make a lot of mistakes with my children. I haven't advised any of them to go into politics, frankly. My 4th child, oh God, she makes me look like a real pinko. I wouldn't want to take her on, frankly. She's very successful. God help the House of Commons if she were ever to turn up there. But I've never encouraged any of them to go into politics, frankly, and I wish now in their earlier years I'd protected them a little bit better. And my wife Julia, she's sort of done it all, really. And you know, I don't know how I could manage a 6.5 hour journey. And what one train away, you know, I've had it easy compared to you, an hour and a half or 2 hours on the train. So I just think that you've got to, if I had my time over again, I would make more time for my family. I really would make more time for my family, which is very tough to do, but that is probably what I would do. And I would keep them out of the limelight more than I did. I have made mistakes, Virginia.
Very honest, David.
I'm being frank with you. What do you think, Stephen?
Well, I mean, I've done this job for 15 years, and my two children were very, very young when I was first elected, and so we've done a lot of that 5.5-hour journeys each way between the constituency in London, a lot with young children and pushchairs and things. It gets easier when the children are older, but there's no question about it. The families pick up a lot of the cost of parliamentary and political life, don't they?
And Stephen, I rudely interrupted you earlier. I think you wanted to ask me about Blair and prime ministers, didn't you?
I'd actually, the question I was going to ask you about Tony Blair, you've already answered in another answer. But I was going to ask you about the future of the United Kingdom, because you touch on that in your book. And yes, you are very associated with Essex. You were, as you said earlier, you were known as Essex Man the night of the election in 1983. No, sorry, 1992, wasn't it, when Essex stayed Conservative? But you've also taken a great interest in... Yeah, you also take a great interest in all parts of the United Kingdom. You've asked questions regularly at Scotland questions and at Wales questions. I remember when I was a Wales office minister responding at the dispatch box to some of your questions. And in your book, you do talk about the future of the United Kingdom and the threat of nationalism. Do you think there is an inevitability about it? How do we as a government, as a party that really cares passionately about keeping the United Kingdom together, what advice would you be giving Boris Johnson and his government on what we can do to safeguard the union?
Well, look, Stephen, because we've got Welsh viewers tonight, I'm really glad you've asked me that question. I can't stomach, what's his name, Mark Drakeford?
Drakeford.
Oh, well, he makes me cringe, absolutely cringe. I much preferred his predecessor to him. I mean, I think he's been hopeless during the coronavirus pandemic. And I don't like it. I can't stomach Nicola Sturgeon, Mrs. Cranky. And I'm so glad that because you'll both be horrified, but I was quite friendly with Alex Salmond. He and I both tried to get Tony Blair impeached, and I've worked with him on a few campaigns, but I'm really glad that the chickens are coming home to roost now. Now, I've known lots of Plaid MPs. I've known lots of SNP MPs, and Wales was always lukewarm to becoming independent, frankly. Very, very lukewarm when you consider low turnout in the referendum. And it was very, very close. And I think that what this pandemic has shown is we can only have one prime minister. We do not want 4 prime ministers. I mean, the lady in Northern Ireland is fine, but this is ridiculous. We can't have 4 governments. We've only got one government. And I think they've taken devolution to another level, which frankly, the legislation didn't plan for really. And when I go back to those days of devolution, it wasn't really to work out in such a way that we've got a pandemic and we've got different rules between the 4 nations. It's absolutely ridiculous. You can't cross borders. You've got different amounts of people who can meet in a park.
You can get a haircut here, Sir David.
Yeah, I know. Well, I might drive there tonight, actually.
No, you're not allowed.
I'll get there in the morning. But, you know, it's bonkers. How did this happen? And I'm sorry, Virginia and Stephen, it's about these people, certainly in Wales and Scotland, trying to do better than Boris. How stupid is all of that? We are one country, the United Kingdom, and we are better together than apart. And it's ridiculous. We're only a tiny little island, for goodness sake, to break it up. And Scotland couldn't manage on their own, and Wales couldn't manage on their own. And I think people are coming to their senses on those issues. So I'm absolutely for the United Kingdom, and I want certainly the 2019 intake, to keep going, become more and more pro-union, frankly. I want, well, I have got the Welsh one, but I want more of this. I want more of this. And look, we can all have a good laugh about the rugby, and I'm really glad that you've done well this year. Well, I'm sort of like that about, really glad that you've done well. But let's keep our sporting rivalries and all of that. But to break up the United Kingdom, we shouldn't even be discussing it at the moment. Absolutely crazy. And Stephen, I blame Tony. I blame Tony Blair for breaking up the United Kingdom. I blame Tony Blair for giving all these unelected quangos paid 4 or 5 times more than we are, and we get the blame for everything. I blame him for that. I blame him for undermining the monarchy. And I will never forgive myself that when it came to the war with Iraq, and I was going to vote against him, he stood at that dispatch box and lied about the weapons of mass destruction. Absolutely unforgivable. Yeah, I think he was worse than Gordon Brown. I mean, Gordon Brown's just a bit miserable, really, and a bit dour. But Tony Blair knew exactly what he was doing, and the way he's carried on since he's been Prime Minister now is absolutely crazy as far as I'm concerned. But I sense I'm boring our audience tonight, and I think the evening is drawing to a close. So you only get one more question each. Virginia.
All right. I want to ask you why you've written this book, and why have you written it now? And also, do you know the Welsh for this?
Oh, I do. Paned.
Well done. That's absolutely fantastic.
And I loved thee.
Good.
Thank you, Virginia. Paned. Yeah,
excellent.
Absolutely. And frankly, the reason, Virginia, I've written the book, so many colleagues write the book that when they've left the House of Commons, and I think that's a shame. Because once you're no longer an MP, you've lost your platform. I mean, it doesn't matter who you are, Prime Minister, dare I say, Stephen, Cabinet, you're soon forgotten. You really are soon forgotten. So if you want to sell more books, do it while you're still an MP. And also, because I think, Virginia, in years to come, there won't be so many MPs who've done 40 years of service. I think it may become shorter and shorter. I could be wrong about that. I want to give a few tips to colleagues and to sort of try and get them to think, oh, there are some good parts there. We should hang on to it as well. And I also thought, Virginia, that the Brexit and the pandemic were unique things. So that's why I did sort of a little diary.
And where's the money? Where's the money from the book sales going towards?
Yeah, so it's going to 3 of my favourite charities, and one is endometriosis. I didn't know anything about endometriosis, but here I am with a son and 4 daughters, and it was a constituent who came to me, explained about the 1.5 million ladies who are suffering from endometriosis. And that's why I decided to give 1/3 of the money to them. And Stephen, we chaps aren't so good at looking out for ourselves, are we?
We're not. And I was delighted to see that one of the charities that the book is supporting is charity Prostate, which is a charity that works particularly with men. Tell us why that's so close to your heart, David.
Well, again, Stephen, a local constituent came to me who was suffering from prostate cancer, and through innovative gene therapy, he's been cured. And that's why I'm supporting him. And the third charity, and I'm sure Virginia and Stephen, you both work with people with learning difficulties. Have either of you heard of the Music Man Project?
I have, yes, because it's associated with MenCap. I'm a patron of a local MenCap charity here in Pembrokeshire. It's not music-based, it's based around gardening and outdoors, but I'm aware of the Music Man Project because it's had quite a bit of UK national coverage.
Mm.
Wonderful. I'm really pleased about that. So a great chap called David Stanley was the deputy head of a local secondary school. He and his wife belong to the Salvation Army. They both have a passion for helping people with learning difficulties, which none of their children have. And he has transformed the lives, not only of these people with learning difficulties, but of their families. So Virginia and Stephen, when I started in 1983, some of these people were in straitjackets. I can remember going to these mental institutions and seeing people in straitjackets. Now, with the most profound disabilities, through the power of music, transform their lives. And how good is it? We put a show on at the London Palladium. I did my Bruce Forsyth bit. Then we went to the Royal Albert Hall. And we're going to Broadway. And if it hadn't have been for the pandemic, we would have been there already. And we're going to play at the Carnegie Hall. So that's where the money is going from. So look, ladies and gentlemen, Stephen and Virginia have been absolutely wonderful tonight in the way that they've grilled me, although they probably say that I haven't got a word in edgeways, because I could go on and on and on for hours. But I'm really grateful for my two colleagues for interviewing me. They're very different people. Stephen has held high office and will absolutely hold high office again. And Stephen, thank you for everything you do for the Jewish community. Really grateful for that. And Virginia is our future. I'm already observing her in Parliament and in a three-way marginal. My goodness, she's everywhere. I've got a number of friends who are constituents, and I think it's just amazing what you are doing in just a short space of time, Virginia. You're making a real difference, and I think your star will continue to shine. But with all colleagues, take a little time to learn about the place, and because once you're on the way up, it's a hell of a way down, frankly, afterwards. And I think just being a member of Parliament is a great thing. So, ladies and gentlemen, I have Welsh relatives, Welsh friends. I love Wales and everything about it. And I'd be even more happy if you would buy my book, Eyes and Ears, A Survivor's Guide to Westminster. Thank you for listening this evening. Good night to everyone.
Noswaith pal.
Noswaith.
This is my journey so far, where I was born, where I became a councillor, when I was first elected to Parliament, and where I am now the Member of Parliament for. Enjoy my journey. I hope you enjoy reading my book, Eyes and Ears, A Survivor's Guide to Westminster.